Michael Turner was 54 years old when he realized his life could be turned upside down in a matter of weeks. His bank account showed a humiliating balance. The mortgage arrears notice was tacked to the door, and the phone rang non-stop with collection calls. 30 years driving trucks across the country had left his body worn out. His back ached, his knees ached, and fatigue was constant. He had endured snowstorms, sweltering heat, and endless days on the road, believing that this effort would guarantee his family's safety. But in one swift move, the company he worked for reduced his hours and cut his salary almost in half. The feeling of being discarded after decades of dedication was like being punched in the gut. Michael saw himself as a cornered man, someone who had followed the rules, done everything right, but who was still on the verge of losing everything. It was a wound to his pride and a weight on his conscience. And yet, there was one place where the pressure of the world seemed to melt away: the small makeshift workshop in the back of the garage. Between antique tools inherited from his father and stacks of old pallets collected from parking lots and warehouses, Michael transformed raw wood into rustic tables, shelves, and benches. There was no manual, just instinct and a desire to create. Each piece bore unique marks. Each cut told a story. It was simply a hobby, a quiet refuge from the din of debt and frustration. But one day, almost without thinking, he took photos of a set of cables and posted them on his Facebook account. The images lacked professional lighting or elaborate descriptions, but within hours, they began pouring in likes, comments, and even messages from strangers asking the price. Michael didn't know it, but that unassuming snap would be the first step in a radical transformation. A change that would not only save his home, but create a $1 million brand from scratch. The beginning of 2020 was a turning point for Michael, and not in a good way. With his income drastically reduced, he was juggling basic bills. His credit card was maxed out, his car needed urgent maintenance, and the increasingly empty refrigerator reminded him that money was running out. His wife, Karen, tried to ease the tension but also felt the weight of fear. They had adult children living their own lives, but the prospect of asking for help was something Michael couldn't bear to consider. Amidst the turmoil, something caught his attention: the messages about the furniture. People he'd never met wanted to know if he could make custom pieces, if they delivered to other cities, if he'd be willing to create custom pieces. At first, he ignored them. This isn't a business, it's just a hobby, he thought. But each day, new comments appeared, and with them, a nagging thought. What if that old wood could turn into money? Michael spent sleepless nights turning this possibility over in his mind. The fear of taking risks mixed with the anger of relying on an unstable job. He remembered stories of people who started late in life and still found success, but he always thought that was for other people, not him. Until one cold March morning, as he stared at a stack of pallets leaning against the corner of the garage, he felt a click. This wasn't just about selling furniture. It was about regaining control. It was about not letting age, the market, or bad luck define his destiny. He took a deep breath and made a silent but powerful decision. He would turn this hobby into a source of income. He didn't know how or where to begin, but he knew he couldn't wait any longer. And in that moment, without even realizing it, Michael took the first step toward the biggest turning point of his life. The turning point didn't come with a party. It came on a gray Tuesday when Michael faced his fear and responded, one by one, to all the requests flooding his inbox. He wrote bluntly, "I make to order, deliver to the Asheville area, customize measurements and finishes. Average lead time, 2 weeks. I'll send a detailed quote." In less than an hour, the notifications started to pop up. One, however, changed everything. Jenna, the owner of a downtown coffee shop, wanted 8 high stools and 2 communal tables to renovate her dining room before summer. She asked for a deadline, price, and payment terms, and she offered a 50% down payment if he agreed. That night, Michael and Karen transformed the kitchen into an office. On the table were a calculator, a notepad, and a burning question: how much does it really cost to do it right? He listed sandpaper, screws, glue, water-based varnish, mineral oil for a food-safe finish, gloves, masks, sanding discs, gasoline, and cardboard for packaging. Pallets might be free, but time isn't. He added up the hours and included a labor fee that seemed high for someone who had never called himself a businessman. Karen was blunt: if we make a mistake, you'll pay to work. They defined a simple policy: a 50% down payment to start, the balance upon delivery, a fee for delivery outside the neighborhood, and a realistic deadline with room for unexpected events. With the budget finalized in a clean, professional Google Doc, Michael sent the PDF and a payment link via Square. 5 minutes later, Jenna replied, "Done." The next email contained proof of the advance. Michael took a deep breath, ran his hand over his face, and felt his skin heat up. It wasn't just a request, it was validation. If one company in the city trusted him, perhaps others would too. That's when the name was born. He couldn't just be the pallet guy anymore. On a greased piece of paper, he scribbled dozens of possibilities until he settled on Blue Ridge Pallet Co., a tribute to the mountains he could see from his porch. He bought a simple wood burner, drew a thick line logo, and began burning the brand into the wood like a vow. He created a professional email address, opened an Instagram page, and updated his Facebook Marketplace listings with better photos. Natural light, a clean background, measurements in the caption, a coffee mug on the table for scale, and a clear call to action. The next decision was bureaucratic and symbolic. Michael formed an LLC in North Carolina, generated an EIN, and went to the bank to open his first business account. He finally separated his own money from the business's. It felt like a lifeline. Next, he invested in the essentials: a decent orbital sander, a filter mask, ear protectors, a moisture meter, and a simple drilling jig to standardize the fittings. Nothing fancy, just what was necessary to deliver safely and with standardization. On Sunday, he printed a production chart and taped it to the workshop wall. Disassembly, selection, cutting, sanding, assembly, finishing, curing, inspection. At each stage, a small square to mark with the right pin. He organized Jenna's parts order by number, separated screws, tested stool heights, and checked stability. On the door, a handwritten sheet of paper read, "Workshop open, no quitting." When the advance was deposited into the company's account, Michael parked in front of the bank and cried alone, unashamed. It wasn't just money, it was permission to believe. Back at the workshop, he felt something shift in his mind. He didn't need to save the year with a heroic leap. He just needed to deliver that first order with excellence. The transformation was no longer a vague hope, but a schedule. And for the first time in a long time, he slept feeling like he was directing his own life. The first few days were a reality check. A pretty palette in a photo can hide splinters, mold, and invisible nails. Michael quickly learned to decipher labels. HT, heat treated, passed. MB, methyl bromide, was discarded immediately. He set aside a corner of the garage just for sorting and realized that the free raw material came at a cost: time. With each pallet disassembled, he lost drill bits, broke sandpaper, and discovered differences in thickness that required makeshift measurements. The schedule began to slip by 2 days, then 3. Then came the first lesson about noise. The sander screeching at 8 o'clock in the evening drew a complaint from the neighbor. Michael improvised quiet hours, bought rubber protectors for the bench legs, and reorganized the workflow, cutting and sanding until late afternoon, assembly and finishing at night. The workshop gained a rubber mat to absorb vibration and a cyclonic vacuum to reduce dust. Breathing better became part of the job. The second setback was financial. In his eagerness to secure orders, he underestimated the finishing time for the large tables and forgot to include 2 extra coats of varnish. When he recalculated, he realized that the order, as it was, would almost be a loss. Instead of cutting corners, he decided to standardize the process. A simple spreadsheet, a checklist of inputs per piece, and a minimum hourly rate, defined in bold pen. He created a deadline policy. 2 weeks meant 10 business days of production and 4 days off for curing and adjustments. Social media presented another test. A photo of a rustic sideboard went viral on Instagram, generating dozens of messages. Great for morale, terrible for a man with only one sander. He responded honestly, filtering requests by size and focus, small pieces for home and cafes, limited ready to ship, and customization upon request. He established a clear niche: compact, robust furniture with a functional, rustic aesthetic for small spaces. The more he said no to anything that deviated from this, the more the yeses paid off. The first customer mishap also occurred. A bench came out slightly wobbly, and Jenna noticed. Michael went to the cafe, leveled it immediately, replaced what was needed, and left a 10% coupon for future orders. He didn't offer timid apologies. He took responsibility professionally. Days later, she published a post praising the service. That was worth more than an advertisement. In logistics, another challenge: packaging. The corners of the tables arrived marked when he used only plastic wrap and regular cardboard. He tested corner protectors, foam, and better tapes until he found a solution that wasn't too expensive. He adopted clear labels, a care manual, and a personal message thanking him for the purchase. Small details, big perception of value. To avoid getting lost in the chaos, Michael created a Kanban board in Trello. Quotes: in production, finishing, done, delivered. Each card had photos, measurements, materials, and the scheduled date. He also opened a spreadsheet for cash flow, defining 3 buckets: reinvestment, emergency, and personal payment. He paid himself first with a modest but fixed amount. The discipline calmed his anxiety. When Jenna's order was ready, he gave it a final test. He sat on each stool, rocked it, checked every screw, ran his hand over the finish, checking for splinters. He loaded the old truck with the care of a jeweler. Upon delivery, he watched the cafe staff move furniture and clear the space like someone inaugurating a stage. People sat down, set down their cups, and smiled. Michael held the receipt and heard the "it was perfect" he needed to move on. He returned home with the balance paid, 2 new orders suggested by Jenna, and 1 certainty. The first steps hurt, but the road was open. Michael's workshop stopped being improvised. He started treating it like a business: a fixed schedule, weekly goals, and process reviews with each delivery. At first, it was still just him, but demand began to increase. Friends offered to help, but he preferred to hire a retired neighbor who also enjoyed carpentry on a project basis, ensuring high standards and reliability. With 2 extra hands, he was able to handle 3 orders simultaneously, something unthinkable just months before. Marketing went from instinctive to strategic. Michael studied product photography techniques on YouTube: soft side lighting, neutral backgrounds, and a 45-degree angle. He bought a simple tripod and began photographing each finished piece as if it were a catalog. On Instagram, he adopted a visual pattern: a white frame, a logo in the corner, the hashtag Blue Ridge Pallet Co., and descriptions that told the story of the wood. Pallet salvaged from a Virginia wine warehouse, or made with wood that has traveled 1,000 miles on American roads. This storytelling captivated customers. Partnerships were the next step. Coffee shops, thrift stores, and craft stores began displaying his pieces on consignment. It wasn't a quick profit, but it increased visibility and brought in direct orders. At local fairs, Michael set up a simple booth: a white canvas, a central table, displayed pieces, and a banner with his logo burned into wood. He placed business cards with a QR code that led to the online catalog. With each fair, he returned with more contacts and followers. His networking wasn't limited to just clients. He joined local entrepreneurs' Facebook groups and woodworking forums where he exchanged tips and learned about suppliers, tools, and trends. He discovered lumber yards selling fine wood scraps at low prices, perfect for premium details. This allowed him to create a signature line with walnut or oak accents selling for a higher price. Michael also improved his quote process. He created an online form on Google Forms for customers to describe size, finish, and intended use. This reduced unproductive conversations and helped filter out genuine interested parties. He now sends quotes valid for 7 days, encouraging quick decisions. The price went up, but sales didn't drop. Quite the opposite. The perceived value increased because each piece came with certified reclaimed wood and a heat-etched serial number. Customers began posting photos on their social media, tagging the company. Michael responded to each one with personalized thanks, building a genuine relationship. With increased production came new challenges: inventory, transportation, and physical health. Michael set up a small warehouse attached to the garage and invested in a hydraulic dolly to prevent injuries when carrying heavy parts. He established mandatory breaks to stretch his body and protect his back, recalling the chronic pain that nearly kept him out of work years earlier. By the end of a year, Blue Ridge Pallet Co. had grown from a casual Facebook order to a business with a 45-day waiting list. Michael looked at his packed calendar and saw not just numbers, but stories. Each table was a piece of his transformation, each bench a step away from the fear that paralyzed him. The journey of growth was just beginning, but he had already left behind the man who thought it was too late to start over. The financial impact of Blue Ridge Pallet Co. was immediate, but what surprised Michael most was the personal transformation. In the first full year, gross revenue exceeded $180,000. With adjusted margins and planned reinvestment, he was able to pay off outstanding debt, build a 3-month emergency fund, and, for the first time in his life, open an investment account. Sales were no longer limited to Asheville. Customers from neighboring cities and even other states began ordering pieces, some paying shipping to receive unique tables and benches. Michael partnered with a local shipping company for secure shipping and began offering reinforced packaging with his branding, enhancing the perception of professionalism. On a personal level, the change was even more profound. His self-esteem, previously eroded by years of exhausting work and little recognition, now grew stronger with each positive feedback. Receiving messages from clients saying that his cables had become a family gathering spot or that his benches had become the backdrop for wedding photos filled him with pride. Karen also flourished during this process. Previously preoccupied with bills and insecurity, she now handled administrative duties and customer service, discovering negotiation and organizational skills she'd never explored before. The business ceased to be Michael's job and became the family project. His social circle also expanded. Previously reserved, Michael began attending entrepreneurial meetings, community events, and sustainable design workshops. He was invited to speak on material reuse and sustainability, something he never would have imagined. On these occasions, he told his story candidly, reminding us that age is no barrier when you have a clear purpose and a willingness to learn. The day he signed the contract to supply furniture for a regional coffee shop chain, Michael returned home and sat on the porch, looking out at the Blue Ridge Mountains. He felt a different silence, not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of peace. He had overcome fear, financial hardship, and the feeling of being discarded. Life hadn't been perfect. There were still deadlines, demanding clients, and sleepless nights fulfilling large orders. But the difference was that now all of it had meaning. The work was hard, yes, but it was his. Every dollar that came in carried the weight of his choice, and proof that a 54-year-old man could indeed create an empire from discarded wood. What was most impressive in Michael's conversations with clients and curious onlookers was not only his talent for transforming old wood into beautiful pieces, but also the clarity with which he explained the process. There were no mystical secrets or miracle formulas, just conscious decisions, consistent work, and a refusal to give up in the most difficult moments. He always repeated, "You don't need everything perfect to start. You need to start with what you have." This phrase would become a mantra among friends and followers. The first lesson he shared was about leveraging existing skills. Michael didn't invent a new market. He simply used something he knew how to do as a hobby and found demand for it. He encouraged people to look at their hobbies and accumulated experiences, asking, "Would someone pay for this? How can I transform this into value for others?" The second lesson was to start small and validate quickly. The first Facebook post wasn't a professional campaign. It was a test. And when responses came in, he listened to the public. He didn't try to make expensive luxury furniture right away. He stuck to the niche of rustic and functional pieces, which reduced risk and facilitated production. Another lesson was to separate personal and business funds from the first paycheck. For him, this was the decision that prevented Blue Ridge Pallet Co. from becoming just an extra asset with no growth potential. With the business account, he began to objectively measure results and reinvest strategically. Michael also talked a lot about continuous learning. Even with decades of professional experience, he allowed himself to revert to being a beginner. He watched tutorial videos, read articles, asked questions on forums, and participated in events. This humility to learn helped him quickly correct mistakes and improve processes without clinging to the old way of doing things. But perhaps the most powerful lesson was about the value of customer service. He believed that in a world where everything can be purchased online, the human experience is the difference. He responded quickly to messages, was honest about deadlines, corrected errors without arguing, and showed genuine gratitude. This created a ripple effect. Customers referred other customers without him having to spend a fortune on advertising. Finally, he demystified the age issue. Many people think that after 50, it's past time to start over, he said. But I'm living proof that's a lie. At 54, I was broke and scared. At 56, I have a recognized brand, debts paid off, and the freedom to choose my future. His talks always ended with a challenge. Write down on a piece of paper something each person has always wanted to try, but put off because they thought it was too late. And keep that paper in a visible place as a daily reminder that it's never too late to start. Looking back, Michael saw a road full of curves, detours, and obstacles, but also full of signs that, at the time, he almost ignored. The hobby that began as stress therapy turned into a business that changed not only his bank account, but also his outlook on life. Blue Ridge Pallet Co. wasn't just about furniture. It was about resilience, creativity, and the courage to turn a moment of crisis into opportunity. He remembered the day he posted the first photo of a table made from old pallets, never imagining that this simple action would open doors to partnerships, loyal customers, and an income that surpassed any salary he'd ever earned. He also remembered the moments he considered giving up, when the wood arrived unusable, when the deadline loomed, when physical exhaustion threatened to take over. But each achievement, no matter how small, added to a cycle of victories that pushed him forward. The transformation was also reflected outside the workshop. Michael began traveling with Karen, something unthinkable years before. They visited craft fairs in other states, sought inspiration, met suppliers, and, most importantly, celebrated the fact that they were building something together. He no longer spent his days counting down the days until his next paycheck. He spent his time creating, deciding, and planning. Today, when someone asks what he does, Michael no longer answers, "I make pallet furniture." He says, "I tell stories through wood." And each piece that leaves his workshop carries with it the story of a man who decided that time would not be his enemy. If you're reading this right now, you might be feeling trapped, limited, or convinced that big changes only happen to others. But the truth is, what separates a dream from a reality is the first concrete action, the one you can take today. It could be sending a message, making a post, scheduling a meeting, testing an idea. It's never too late to start over financially. It's never too late to turn a forgotten skill into something that changes your future. If Michael's story touched you, like it, share it to inspire others, and comment on the project or skill you've always wanted to turn into a business. Your turnaround can start now, and maybe years from now, you'll be the one telling your story.